We are back with another episode of Ask the Expert from Creative Pro and Creative Pro Week. And you may know I'm David Blatner. I'm the co-host of Creative Pro Week. And I've got Mark Heaps here, the Mark Heaps, and who you may have seen us. We've talked in the past. We've done. I've interviewed Mark in the past, and Mark has been the MC of PSAI and Click for Creative Pro Week, but he does way more than that. He is a star in his own right with a very strong background in Photoshop and Illustrator. He's been a Max Master at Adobe Max. He has Domo, and he also is a presentation design specialist who has worked at Duarte in the past and now does incredible presentations for companies large and small. So I'm so happy to have you back, Mark. It's great.
Cool. Thanks for having me again. Always good to chat with you guys. Creative Pro has a place in my heart, obviously. So.
Well, we've been working with you for years, and
True,
I mean officially years now. It used to be a year.
PepCon was the first one, right? I was the keynote speaker at PepCon years ago, and then the relationship was born, and I think you guys adopted me. There was a star, and you and Mary followed to a manger, and yeah, there you go.
Well, I think that you fit into your philosophy really seems to fit into what we've been trying to do with Creative Pro for the past few years, which is building community and sharing information. It's all about learning, sharing, and then going out and creating from all the stuff that you've learned. So, and you really have this philosophy of wanting to give, and that's super important. I mean, it's not just I've got all these cool secrets, but you are constantly wanting to give to your audience, and we love that. So thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the stuff that you have done at Creative Pro Week, but also I want to talk to you a little bit about what's happened recently. This announcement about Adobe coming out with Photoshop for tablet, because a lot of people are some people. It's funny. I talked to some people. They're like, "Oh my gosh, this is going to change everything. I get to do Photoshop on a tablet." We don't have it yet, but hopefully, won't take too long in 2019 to get that.
2019 is what the team is telling me. So
okay. And then I talked with a lot of other people who are like, "Why would I want to use a tablet to do Photoshop? I mean, I have a machine." What's your sense about tablet? I mean, there's this whole mobile tablet thing that Adobe has been pushing for so hard for so long. Do you think that's really a thing? Is it similar?
I was apprehensive of it at first, right? And as the gap is reducing between what are programs and what are apps, right? And that's just marketing nomenclature. I mean, really, there's not a big difference in how they're created, but the operating systems are different, right? And there was a disparity between what is a mobile operating system capable of, what is a traditional desktop operating system capable of. But I think back to, I've been doing this a long time. I remember when designers started asking if they could work on laptops. And that was like a big, you'll never be able to work on a laptop. And we all had these screaming power towers and all these different things. And people freaked out about it. And then suddenly, most designers I now know work on laptops. Most of them don't have desktops. Really, right. the video 3D guys are really the only ones that are still doing a lot of desktop. They're limited to that, right, because of the capabilities of the processor and rendering and things. So I was apprehensive about tablets at first. I think it is going to be the way of the future, but we're also seeing the capabilities level up, right? I mean, the new iPad Pro that they just announced, one of my clients and good friends, Isabel LeMay, she does these amazing Photoshop pieces that are huge. I mean, you're talking hundreds of gigabytes in these files. They print it, 300 to 600 DPI, 18 feet wide by 12 feet tall.
Oh my gosh.
And Apple just contacted her. She did an event in New York this week. They showcased her files on the iPad Pro. And she's working with Adobe on actually importing those into Aero and making them an augmented reality experience where you could walk through her paintings. And if you'd have told me even 6 months ago that I could open one of her files on an iPad Pro, I would have looked you right in the eyes and said, you're a liar.
Right.
They did it during their demo. And so the gap is reducing. You're seeing the accessories like keyboards and tablets and styluses and things work with the iPads and tablets more easily. So I don't even want to think of them as mobile devices anymore. I think they're the next evolution of just a laptop.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is the operating system, right? And that gap is being reduced rapidly.
Well, I'm going to push back there just a little bit because I don't think the only difference is the operating system. I think the other difference is the ability to have a hover. Like you're hovering, you can see your cursor. There's no way to really see a cursor on a tablet. It's a very different experience, and oftentimes, even if you have a stylus, you're interacting with your screen in a really different way than people interact with laptops or desktop machines. I mean, just the physical interaction is different.
Yeah, I think there's that's a good point. You know, how we touch, like I remember when Wacom first released the Cintiq and you would draw on the screen.
Yeah.
And everyone lost their mind. And I got to use one at an event, and they said, "Hey, we'd love for you to demo with it." And it was kind of funny. They gave it to me, never used it before, and had to use it at the event. Okay. And afterwards they said, "What did you think?" And I said, "I hate it." And they went, "What?" And I said, "My hand is in my way while I'm designing. It's literally between me and the details that I want to work on."
Yes.
So this is a problem, right? But I also grew up being used to having a mouse. Now I watch a lot of young designers, and I see how they work with mobile tools. And a good example of this is, members of my team have touchscreen laptops. Mm-hmm. So it's still a laptop. They're still designers, still doing their work. But they, instead of zooming with quick keys, will just reach over and pinch zoom on the laptop. And so for them, it's like second nature. So I don't think it's a challenge for the evolution of designers. I think it's a challenge for old farts like me who are used to having a cursor, right? But I have also seen people work on tablets with a wireless mouse controller. And I've also seen them use Air devices where they use the actual iPad as a tablet, but then they project to a screen and they can see their cursor and things there. So I think that's going to be a very simple little bit of just development from a UX standpoint.
So we need to get used to it. Those of us who are used to one way of working need to get used to new ways of working. What do you think about the other tools out there, though, like Illustrator? Can we really be using Illustrator in the same sort of way on a tablet or a touchscreen? And then there's InDesign. InDesign, I mean, has been – people have been trying to figure out how to do page layout on a tablet for years, and it's really hard. It is
really, really hard. And I think, there is an evolution, right? Looking at a tablet and saying, "Oh, I can paint or retouch on it a la Photoshop." That kind of makes sense because the gesture, the experience, that's not unlike people using a Cintiq or a stylus or anything. So not a huge jump to see how that would work. Illustrator, I think we're probably pretty close to that point. I think you're going to have a very high level of sensitivity and tracking to be able to grab anchor points and curves and do things. Yeah. So, but I think it's coming. I think it's going to happen. The bigger challenges, I think, are people that do publishing and layout, things like InDesign users. Yep. I already see coders and developers on tablets all the time. Like that's so normal for me now. Literally, I'd say half of the developers I know are actually working on tablets.
Wow.
But for people that are doing layout, publishing layout, things like InDesign, I think that's the final hurdle in the experience, right? That's a whole other realm.
Interesting. Now, here's another pushing it even further, and that's presentation design. I mean, as I said at the beginning, you have a very long history in presentation design and building PowerPoint and Google Slides and all kinds of slide decks for companies. Sure. Is presentation design something that is also moving to tablet and mobile? It's
the ask. It's absolutely the ask. We get a lot of asks now for our company to build presentations that aren't the traditional format of a presenter in a room with a screen, right? If you think about the sizes of presentation, there's your event presentation, which is literally a stage and a screen and an audience. Mm-hmm. There's the typical commercial enterprise presentation, which is in a boardroom and 5 to 10 people sitting around a table. The presenter is actually not in front of the screen. They're very often on the other end of the table controlling the screen. Mm-hmm. Now we're getting a lot of asks saying, "Hey, can you make our presentation work on a tablet or a phone?" Because we've got field reps that are working at a conference and they want to be able to pull up a presentation and talk to it with people standing next to them. Mm-hmm. We want to be able to give value propositions and elevator pitches there in the moment when we have the opportunity. We don't want to schedule those appointments. We have the person that's pivotal decision maker right now. So there's a lot of challenges in that. The scale, very often legibility is a challenge when you talk about a room that has a screen that's so big, but 800 people sitting back in rows.
Mm-hmm.
Scale of typography, legibility, contrast, projection, color, those are all challenges. That completely flips when you talk about devices that are smaller than the face the person is looking at it with.
Yes, right.
But we do get that ask. And I think that's why Google Slides and apps like that, Flovella, et cetera, why we're seeing them gain traction, because they're so collaborative and almost agnostic from a device experience, right? We have a client right now. It's one of our biggest clients. We built their communication toolkit, presentation toolkit. It's nearly a 200 slide toolkit, and it serves 15,000 people at their org. Wow. They just came back and said, how much of this can we make with a complete mobile control? In other words, is it Google Slides? Like, I can't talk about what we're building, but we want these proprietary features and tools to exist for people in mobile. So can someone at the home base edit on a desktop or laptop, but then can refinement and edits be made on a tablet in the field? Can they tailor to their audience before they walk through the door? So whether we think it's going there or not, the ask is for it to go there.
Is that happening with for example, with PowerPoint and Office 365 or anything like that? It seems like I do believe they've been adding increasing tools for mobile.
Yeah, they have, and they even have templates that are included with Office 365 for mobile devices. I will say it's funny how many clients want to jump on Google Slides, and when I say why, they say, well, because it's so easy to access it anywhere in a browser, it's so easy to use on the web, and collaboration is the biggest feature. We can tag and comment. People can be working on the same slide at the same time.
Right.
We want that, and I kind of sit back and go, so you can do that now with Microsoft. You can do that with Office 365. Those features have existed for a little while now, and this is where Microsoft typically fails in their marketing and educating their user base.
Right.
People don't know about it. Now, what's interesting is when I bring it up, they go, we're just going to use Google Slides.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is the peer base has dove into that and had an experience that they've been excited about. So now it's hard for us to sell PowerPoint or Keynote or any other online capability because they didn't dive into it with kind of an excitement or a vigor. Now it feels like we're trying to sell something to catch up to Google Slides, when in reality it's there first.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, I've just been learning more about Office 365, and
it does a lot.
It does a lot. I mean, the ability to merge together all these other tools that we've been using. I mean, I don't want this to be an advertising for Microsoft, but because I don't even know how good it is, but it looks like it's really impressive. The idea that I could replace a lot of the stuff I've been doing with Google Docs and who was just bringing this up was Mel Grant, who has been at Creative Pro Week for several years, and PepCon before that, and she was just telling me about this, and I started looking into it and thought, wait a minute, I had no idea. It is shocking to me that Microsoft has all these tools and yet almost nobody knows about them, especially people in the creative communities. Of course, it's Microsoft, right? So because it's Microsoft, people on the creative side often go, I wouldn't touch that. It's Microsoft.
Well, I think what I think the challenge is, even beyond the brand, because Microsoft has really penetrated the creative market really well. So, I mean, you see much deeper collaboration with Adobe now. Yeah. The CEOs coming on stage together. I mean, this last Max was the first time we've had Apple on stage in quite a while.
Yep.
The Surface and the other devices Microsoft has been building have really been geared towards the power that creatives expect. And look, I'm a diehard Apple user, owner, but I have to admit, Microsoft has grabbed a lot of my peers and colleagues. What I think is the limitation here is, and I think this is the simplest way to describe it, what version is Google Slides currently?
Who knows?
No one knows, because the reality is it just exists, right? And this is why Adobe's moved Photoshop and so many other tools to a subscription base. It just is.
Yep.
When I call clients and say, hey, you should be on Office 365, they go, oh, we're still using PowerPoint this version and PowerPoint this version.
Yeah.
We have some clients that are using toolkits that are 8 years old in PowerPoint. And Docs, or not Docs, in Word, et cetera. And when we talk about using these online share features, usually their procurement departments go, whoa, 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 what cost is that enterprise license? And there's a hurdle to overcome, and what's the revision versioning that happens. You don't have any of that with Google Slides. Nobody knows what version is. You just sign up for free, use it for free, collaborate for free. Now there's security concerns there, right? And that's a whole other discussion. But at the end of the day, they can dive in without hurdle. And you can't do that with Office 365. That's the perception. And so that's the challenge. Again, it's how Microsoft has marketed this. But we have clients all the time that say, look, we're not going to go to Office 365. These are also the same clients that say, we're not going to stop using CS6 for Photoshop or Illustrator. And I'm like, enjoy the dark ages.
So just quickly back on the PowerPoint thing. It seems like one of the things you get though with PowerPoint is you have a lot more tools. I mean, I know there are a lot of designers out there who say, no, you can't design in PowerPoint. It's it's too limited. You just have to use those templates, and it always ends up looking ugly. And you proved that wrong at this last Creative Pro Week. We did that one-day event called Click, which next year, June. So Creative Pro Week next year is going to be June 10th through 14th, and the last 2 days we're going to be doing a 2-day Click this year. So we're expanding the presentation design element out to 2 days, and Mark will be there, of course. So one of the things you proved at Click was you and Richard Goring and Joe Buckwald. You were showing you can do amazing things with PowerPoint.
Oh, totally. Yeah,
and
it's what's that old adage? A poor man blames his tools. Someone asked me about that at a user group meeting about designing with PowerPoint, and they kind of made a joke about my team working in it. And I brought up a story of a man in India who carved through a mountain to make a road from his village using like a spoon and a basic shovel, and it took him 22 years. I go, but he literally saved lives, right? You can get anything done with these tools these days, but it's a lack of awareness, a lack of education in the tool that generally what I find, right there. Dan Gard spoke at Click, and he to me is the ultimate guru of anybody that works in that tool. I've never met anybody that knows as much as him. And he's literally come at me and said, hey dude, why did you do that in Photoshop? And I said, well, I needed everything to be the same tone. And then in 3 clicks, he'll turn every photograph into the same style treatment in PowerPoint. I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, there's a whole photo editor thing. And then there's a second tier of it. And there's a lot of hidden tools in there that people don't realize exist. So it's interesting when we tell people, oh, yeah, we drew that in PowerPoint, or, oh, we drew that in this tool. That kind of freaks them out. Yeah,
totally makes sense. Okay, that said, we have to wrap up in a second, but I don't want to end without getting back to Photoshop and Illustrator, because they are the tools that we use that every day, and I've said this before. Photoshop and Illustrator are the best InDesign plugins on the market, and they all add into InDesign. Ultimately, it's all about InDesign, right?
Right.
No. For some people, it's not all about InDesign. For some people, they're living in Photoshop and Illustrator, and you do that. Those are your main hubs, right? Those are the tools you use. I want to just – do you have a favorite tip or favorite keyboard shortcut for each of those programs that you just people need to know this. They need to get this into their hands.
Oh, my gosh. A favorite quick key?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I don't know. I guess –
there's no keyboard shortcuts, no quickies on a tablet. There we go. That's another problem.
You know what? That's an interesting point, because I am a quick key junkie, and that's a really valid point. I wonder how they'll overcome that.
All right.
I have different ones for each app. The one that I constantly show people in Photoshop, which is dumb and simple, but it's the edit fade quickie, right? Command-Shift-F, because a lot of the time if I paint something and then it's too strong, I see a lot of designers going undo, and they reduce the opacity and paint again, and undo, and they paint again, reduce. If you hit Command-Shift-F, you can actually turn the opacity up and down of the last thing you did, and it applies to everything. So if you did levels, you can fade it. If you did painting, you can fade it. And so if you do a fill, you can fade it. So for me, I do that because then in real time I can see a preview of what my stroke looks like at varying blends.
Yeah.
So that one helps me a lot there. I don't know, man.
I love that. I had totally forgotten about the fade feature.
It's really valuable to retouchers, especially. So yeah, that was probably my favorite.
That's great. I love that. I love that. Okay, and then I want to just get your sense of Creative Pro Week and Click PSAI. You were just in a few months ago. We were in New Orleans, and is there something that jumps out from for you, of something surprising? Like, what did you learn from New Orleans that you walked away with going, oh my gosh? I mean, we always learn something.
For Creative Pro or Click?
Whatever you want.
You know. So speaking of Click, right? I mean, Click was a passion point for me because I've dreamed of there being a presentation design production conference for years, long time. And what it did for me is it validated that this was a community already. We thought, I remember you and I talking about it, saying if a few people show up, that'd be great. Yeah. And it turned out that we had quite a few people show up. Yeah. And the things that people said to me afterwards consistently were, I never knew I had a tribe. I never knew, right? The typography people, the illustration people, the photo people, the InDesign people, right? That you guys have a huge support and following for the InDesign conference. But presentation design, we're kind of these hidden redheaded stepchild back of the house, kind of thing. And I feel a little bit like Click was the coming out party for us. We all got together and people were coming up to us and saying, I didn't know so many of us loved and did this and focused on this. And that was the big takeaway for me that made me want to – it energized me, truthfully. It made me want to go out and reach further and find more of the people working in this field. And so that was the big thing, was like, wow, if you do presentation design, you care about presentation design, you want to see it become more legitimized, I guess, as a career track, that's the event where you're going to find those people.
Well, the other thing that surprised me was the number of people who did not love presentation design, but sort of forced themselves to go anyway. Yeah. And they came away with a sense of, okay, it's not my tribe, but people were so welcoming and they were so kind of, okay, let me walk you through this and show you how you could love it a little bit more, how you could feel more comfortable. We've been saying for years this idea that if you're not having fun doing it, you're not doing it right. Right?
Yeah,
and
sure,
it's not to blame you, but the idea is that people need to, if there's something wrong, if you're afraid of the feature or of the product, or you don't want to be doing it, there's got to be a reason why, and it's often that you don't understand it well enough, or you don't understand how to think about it. And I loved how people were very welcoming, very very kindly. Walking the attendees through the process, and we had people going, just minds were being blown. There's this great quote one of the attendees wrote on the surveys, I've been doing a great disservice to my presentations, but and realizing I'm going to be able to use these tools right away. I'm going to go home and start putting this into action.
I actually had people after Click. I think it was like 2 months after Click. I had 2 people email me their presentations and showed me that they'd used techniques they learned in the presentations. Cool. And they actually said in there, "I'm excited to do this now." It's almost like we gave them permission to care about it, because for a long time people said, "Well, PowerPoint and the creative community hates Microsoft," is the old story, right? And suddenly it was sort of like being that kid that has a weird hobby and you don't want anyone to know because you don't want to be considered a freak. And suddenly it's like, oh no, it's okay to do that. I mean, if you think like, Comic-Con and cosplay, like that's such a huge thing now. Right. But if you'd have told people 25 years ago, like, oh, by the way, I like dressing up as an elf and pretending to be, Legolas or whatever, you get some weird looks. But that's not as big a case anymore, and that's kind of what it does feel like, which is why I use that kind of coming out party kind of analogy. Right. People realize they're allowed to take pride in this again, and even when your bosses don't. Right. A lot of clients in presentation work don't put pride into it, and when you show them that you can make something great and that you care, suddenly you'll see them care more. And so I think that's a good message for anybody working a creative field is, you can't expect your clients to love something if they don't sense you love it too. And so you've got to put yourself into the work like that. You have to show your passion in the work, not just your attitude, but literally it has to come across in the work. And I have client last night on a call saw me cleaning something up on the screen, and he goes, I'm sure that's fine, Mark. We can move on. And I was like, hold on, I got to fix this. And he was like, man, you really care about those little things. I'm like, yeah, I do, because they matter. And I care about them. Look, it doesn't serve me. I'm not getting on stage with this. You are. but I don't want any of the audience to think you made cheap decisions.
Mm.
And so, his voice has changed now. And when we work on these things, he's willing to sit back and let me do that, because at the end of the day, he knows I have a passion for making him look good.
I love that. I love that. That is really cool. Thank you so much for taking the time, Mark, to talk about all these issues. This is really helpful, and I'm getting excited. I'm getting excited about what we're going to be doing next year at Creative Pro Week and all the other stuff. Oh, I do need to mention one other thing, a Mark-related thing, and that is that you wrote this great feature article for InDesign magazine. So for people who are InDesign users but who are trying to get into presentation design or want to understand more about presentation design and may even want to use InDesign, which is a crazy idea, but not so crazy after all, maybe using InDesign for presentation design. You wrote this great article, feature article in InDesign magazine, issue 114, I think it was. So we want to make sure we'll put that in the comments or something.
With great help and appreciation from Mr. Mike Rinkin and all of his advice, because he's definitely the power user, and I'm a rookie compared to you guys in InDesign, but it is a viable tool. And I will say this, that perks some ears up at Adobe. I've already had calls with Adobe saying, are you really using these for presentations? And then they want to maybe do a meeting with evangelist Terry White and talk to him about presentations in InDesign. So there's an interest there, which is kind of keen.
Oh, it totally makes sense to me, of course.
Well, you would cook pasta with InDesign if that was a feature. So let me get this straight. If I run 400 grep scripts at a time, does that make my laptop hot enough to boil water?
Yes.
Because I can boil water with InDesign.
I can see it. This might work. All right, Mark, it's been a pleasure. Have fun out there. And Erica, take it away. Shut it down.
All right,
we're gonna shut up. Yeah, thanks, thank you so much. All right.